Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Ari and Big Mike are proud to present the greatest podcast in the world. No snakes, no snowflakes allowed, and summer is coming.
We're back to messing up the intro.
Oh, stop. I just tripped over my own tongue.
Okay. All right. Well, you have to make these jokes again now, don't I?
I know, you're excited.
Anyway,
about the jokes.
this is the podcast that was started by two guys on cigar night. We were talking about birth rates and patriarchy last time. And I wanted to comment that how ironic I find it that atheists are just so obsessed with Darwin and Darwinism. Because in Darwinian terms, atheism is a maladaptive trait. Specifically, atheists have quite a lot fewer children than religious people. In other words, Charles Darwin is calling a lot of atheists losers. They will not be represented in the gene pool. Of course, I know some atheists who have plenty of kids. But by and large, that statistic holds up. Right? The adaptive trait is to believe in a religion that encourages you to be fruitful and multiply, and those atheists who do not believe in that and figure that this life is all we have and might as well enjoy it because you're not getting a second one and there's nothing after this.
Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die.
Exactly. That is a maladaptive trait. You see, the point I'm trying to make is that if we want to talk about birth rates and what it takes to keep our society going so that, as Lincoln said, our way of life shall not perish from the earth. That is not something that's going to be solved by politics. It's only something that can be solved by culture. And one of those, as we said, one of those cultural aspects that gets people to multiply, of course, is religion as defined as a exchange relationship with the supernatural, God, so to speak, or God, actually.
Be fruitful.
Saying
but see,
be
that
fruitful and
hold on. You're just talking, though, about the Judeo-Christian line about be fruitful and multiply.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But let's take a look at a society that was that did not believe as we believe, Germany. Okay, from the turn of the 20th century until the middle of the 20th century, German birth rates just fell off a cliff. The National Socialists, realizing that they wanted to wage war and win those wars, realized that population was power, and they encouraged their citizens very strongly to have children. Okay, so they're looking at a chart here from Statistia.com. In 1935, German women were having 1.7 babies per woman per lifetime. By 1940, they managed to get that birth rate back up to about 2.24, which is around replacement. This is by no means being fruitful and multiplying. And
okay, so pause there. I want to
interject. But by the end of the war, they were back down again to 1.9 babies per woman per lifetime, i.e., they were below replacement. Politics, even in a government, an evil government, that was encouraging their people to have children, it wasn't working. Financial issues have something to do with it, but it also has to be the number of children people have is most accurately predicted by surveying people. How many children do you want to have? And people in financially harder times will put off having those children. And when that happens, people don't realize how quickly, for example, a woman's reproductive capacity falls off from its peak. The statistic I read, and I think it's in Philip Longman is the man who wrote the article I just showed you. Philip Longman has a book called The Empty Cradle. And in it, he cites an article from the Journal of the American Medical Association saying that a woman's reproductive capacity is about half of what it was at its peak when she is under 30 years old. And that is not something that is taught to young women in schools. It is not something that is widely known, and it is something that will affect people's life plans.
So say it one more time so the people in the back heard it.
According to Philip Longman, who wrote his book, The Empty Cradle, a woman loses about half of her fertility in the sense that she is half as likely to get pregnant in any given month by the time she is around 27, could be around 30. This is not something that is typically taught in sex ed classes or taught in schools. It's not something that's widely made known by the media. It's not something that you learn on your mother's knee, for example. It's not something that people really know or expect. So when people are making their plans for life, they run the risk of being accidentally childless. That when it comes to, that they have these financial goals that they want to meet before they have children. And by the time they've met those goals, it's very difficult for them to have children. Consequently, they're childless not by choice. And this is one of those things that better education in terms of what reproductive biology is like can help. I'm not saying it's going to solve the problem, but hiding that information causes problems that don't have to be there.
I hear that. You know, there's a lot of things though, but hold on, I want to read a little thing here for you to continue this point. Women, of course, also have a reason to grow weary of the patriarchy, particularly when men themselves are no longer upholding their patriarchal duties. Historian Suzanne Cross notes that during the decades of Rome's civil wars, Roman women of all classes had to learn how to do without men for prolonged periods, and accordingly developed a new sense of individuality and independence. Few women in the upper classes would agree to a marriage to an abusive husband. Adultery and divorce rates became rampant. Often, all that sustains the patriarchal family is the idea that its members are upholding the honor of a long and noble line. Yet once a society grows cosmopolitan, fast-paced, and filled with new ideas, new people, and new luxuries, this sense of honor and connection to one's ancestors begin to fade, and with it, any sense of the necessity of reproduction. I love that line. I love this idea. It's like reasons why we're not having kids anymore. There's so many things out there that we just don't even know about or understand. And as women understand that they themselves can now be much more a part of a society where they can work for themselves, they can live for themselves, and they're no longer required to be beholden to a man or something like that. It's like, what do you do now? So there's a glass ceiling because the guys in power are still men. So the women got to break these glass ceilings and go for it. All power to them. But those people aren't having the kids that people who have that religious belief have. The people who had that belief. Because what happened to Rome, it's like the old way of thinking about Rome died out. And there became a new way about it. And what happened to that society? They focused on greed. And they got soft and they got weak and then they got run over.
You ever hear of a movement called the Red Pill?
No.
The Red Pill purports to tell you what life is really like. It comes from the movie The Matrix. You familiar with that movie?
Of course.
Okay, where Keanu Reeves' character is offered the blue pill or the red pill, and the blue pill means you keep on dreaming, and the red pill is come and learn the truth. Well, the Red Pill is a movement that purports to tell you the real truth about men and women. And while a lot of what they say is true, a lot of it can be quite destructive in the sense that what Philip Longman said, and by the way, the article's from what, 2007, 2008?
Something like that.
So he was writing a decade and a half ago. And what he says still holds up. So when people talk about the red pill, a lot of it is men saying that women as a group are misbehaving. Look at what happens to men in divorce courts. Look at the choices men have in dating pools, and they talk about how many women have like high body counts or whatever. And then, of course, there's on the other side, there's, especially feminists who say, oh, men as a group are misbehaving. And, I'm here in the middle saying, hey, we're all human beings. We're a fallen creature. Everybody's misbehaving. And what we as individuals need to do is learn how to get along with others. Because if you think about it, upholding a marriage, if you're married, and this month it'll be 25 years for the wife and I.
Mazel tov.
Upholding a marriage is just a subset of people skills. And a lot of keeping a marriage together is to look at your partner when conflict is starting and thinking to yourself, what's going on here? What's my contribution to this mess, and what's her contribution to this mess? Well,
hold on. I want to interject here. I want to go back to the Matrix for a second.
Well, but before, just let me finish my point here. So it's knowing what's going on, and to a certain extent, like red pill material. Look how women are misbehaving. Some of that makes a good point. There's that kernel of truth. Sometimes women are contributing to the problem. And I'm not saying that the radical feminists or whatever have a point, but a lot of women, Sydney Watson, for example, is an example. She makes the point about how men are misbehaving, the Andrew Tates of the world or whatever. Knowing who's misbehaving and why is a start of the problem. So getting back to what I was saying about marriage in general, knowing what's really going on here between you and me is an essential skill to keeping a marriage happy and together. So ultimately, that is, in an individual level, how people are going to get through this mess. How we're going to get through this as a society, I have no idea. But as an individual, the only answer is people skills and learning to read people and evaluate people and knowing what's going on. Because if an idiot like me can stay married and happily so for 25 years, I guess it's something that's doable.
This guy in the article about how declining birth rates also changed let me get my glasses on. National temperament. In the United States, for example, the percentage of women born in the late 30s who remained childless was near 10%. By comparison, near 20% of the women born in the late 50s are reaching their end of reproductive lives without having children. The greatly expanded childless segment of contemporary societies, whose members are drawn disproportionately from the feminist and counterculture movements of the 60s and 70s, will not leave a genetic legacy, nor will the emotional or psychological influence on the next generation compare to that of their parents. And he goes on and he talks about so much stuff, like about that. Like, just here we are, like what we are is changing. To go back to the last episode, you're talking about Germany. What will Germany's population be in the next 50 years? With the white Germans not reproducing at the same rate as the Muslims who are in their country, at what point will Germany become a Muslim country simply because the sheer numbers of Muslims in Germany will overpower those who came before them, the people who lived in Germany for thousands of years, even before it became a country?
Feminists say that what we need to do is smash the patriarchy. And society has changed so much in the last, say, 150 years. I mean, the biggest change that society has really gone through is, especially in America, is that most people live in cities or suburbs as opposed to being family farmers out in rural areas. That's really the biggest change, the biggest shift that has happened in people's lives. And after that, people have gotten electricity, they've gotten all these things, and that have saved people labor. And all of a sudden, women went from having to labor very hard on a farm, having to labor very hard taking care of laundry, which before electricity was around is an extremely difficult job. And all of a sudden, women had a lot more time. So that the role of men and women in society has changed so much since the decline of the family farm that you look at society now, it seems like it's very, very hard to say that this is patriarchy in the way that in any rational definition of what patriarchy is.
Well, patriarchy in today's society is different than what it was even in our society here in America 50 years ago. That's one. Wait, hold on. Let me finish the second down. Let me ask you a question, right? Since we're talking about patriarchy, we're talking about this continuing on for future generations. I'm going to give, this is my last question in this podcast for you. Gloria Steinem and other women like her in the 60s and 70s were all about, feminism, equal rights amendments, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of things that I can bring up with the blah, blahs. I'm just saying, how many of those women didn't have kids because of that movement? How many of those women who, what's going on with the next generation? Because those women who didn't have kids, there's no next generation. The women who are now fighting for feminism are people who then left, and I'm not saying...
left the gene pool?
No, they didn't leave the gene pool. I'm saying the modern day feminists, the ones who are then there, are stemming from more of the conservative families. And, the idea of even what feminism is becoming different. Like, the way I see it, it's like, how much of an effect has that really had on society? Because now... what do you see? Like in the old ways, feminism was more about raising up women. Now it seems to be more about getting back at men.
That seems about right. When women, feminists, not women, when feminists talk about smashing the patriarchy, the question is what's going to replace it? And one thing you could be 100% sure of is that it's not going to be some feminist utopia. Because as a society, as any society needs to get certain things done, it needs to grow food to feed the people. It needs to get rid of garbage and sewage. It needs to build roads for transportation and other machines. It needs engineers, and it needs this. And most of the people volunteering for those jobs are men. It needs people to put roofs on houses, and nearly all of those people are men. It needs a lot of things, and people just segregate themselves by sex into which jobs they are willing to do. Loggers are almost all men. Highway construction guys, almost all men. So if the feminists do succeed in smashing patriarchy, as they say they want to do, what's going to replace it is not going to be that feminist utopia, but something else that there's a 100% chance that a feminist of today will look at this society of the future and call that a patriarchy too. And I think ultimately what Mr. Longman says in his article is that no matter how you organize society, you're always going to get something that looks a lot like what a feminist would call patriarchy. Want to close it out?
I want to thank you all for listening. Y'all have a good morning, good afternoon, good night. And be sure to like and subscribe and make sure that you let us know what you think in the comments, and y'all have a great day.
And the standard book plug. Fill it in here. Thank you.
Okay.